Let's go. Let's go.
It's still recording.
Good morning. I know. I see that we're recording. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to Cloud Dialogues, episode 4?
Yes, correct.
Yes, episode 4. We're not even in the double digits yet, and I'm confused about how far along we are, which is a bit of a worry. Anyway.
It's early in the morning for you.
It's early in the morning for me. Yes, it is. Yes, you've had a bit more time to wake up with it being like 8 o'clock there. And, you know, having said that, it is 10 o'clock here. So there's really not much of an excuse. So today's podcast is about cloud migration strategies. So what we're going to talk about is, obviously, as executives, it's really important that when there are significant changes going on in our environment, whether we're talking like a people environment or an IT environment, that we really understand what's going on in order to make sure that we can continue to deliver on our business goals and maximize the delivery as much as possible. But what we're going to do is we're going to dive into as non-tech. We're not going to go down a technical hole, but we're going to dive into the different approaches to cloud migration, with the three key ones obviously being.
I'll try not to.
That's why I'm here to pull you out of that hole, Matt. So we'll go through the 3 approaches to cloud migration, which are primarily rehosting, refactoring, and rearchitecting, and how to choose the right strategy for your specific business needs. Obviously, cloud migration is the process of moving our data, applications, and workloads from an on-premise environment or legacy systems to that cloud-based infrastructure. And choosing that migration strategy, making sure that we choose the right migration strategy for the workload or the application that we're trying to migrate is going to be critical for the success of that transition. And it's really important that both IT and non-IT executives really understand those strategies and the potential implications and risks associated with those strategies. And then what we're also going to do is talk a bit about the other 3 R's, which are, you know, and anyone from AWS or Azure or GCP, maybe just turn off your just turn off the podcast when you get to this section. But I think it's a reality for a lot of organizations is that, you know, in terms of like, but there will be some instances where it's just not practical to migrate certain workloads. So we'll go through the other 3 R's, which is retire, retain, and repurchase, because I think it's important that, you know, obviously in an ideal world, we get everything transitioned to cloud, but for most enterprises, it's just not a reality for whatever sort of circumstances they're facing for each individual workload. All right.
Rehosting, Georgia.
Rehosting.
Rehosting. What's rehosting? Or do you want to ask me?
Well, I think a lot of people would call rehosting a lift and shift. So if you hear that terminology, I think that's an important thing to call out is if you're hearing people in your organization say lift and shift, they're referring to rehosting.
Yep, and it's kind of, in a way, it's the simplest because it requires less effort from your infrastructure teams, because it's basically taking an image of your system and uploading it to the cloud and starting up a new system with that image, and away you go. Sounds simple in theory, but you know, there's always some gotchas. You've got to know your app dependencies. You've got to know your app dependencies. And your app interactions, you got to be careful not to split out, you know, your application if it's talking to other systems between on-prem and cloud, which, you know, could cause issues. So, from a latency perspective, so there are still some things that you've got to sort of be careful of.
Yeah, and obviously different circumstances for each workload or application, right? Like, I think when we refer to lift and shift, it seems like it's just one of those like really easy things that we can do for, and in some instances it is, right? But in other instances, like you might have applications that are talking to like legacy databases that then, oh, well, we actually can't find a practical way to like make them connect, or maybe even like forget about, you know, we didn't discover them through the course of that initial review. Therefore, you know, we've got to take some old data and throw it into RDS or into a relational database in order to enable the migration. So I think it's important to note that lift and shift, it sounds like it's this simple, fast thing, but in a lot of instances, it's just not a reality.
Yeah, and also be careful of servers that are hosting multiple applications on the same host. If you move a host that's got, you know, 5 apps on it, you've got to make sure that you're aware of all those applications being moved over and all the implications around that. So, you know, making sure you've got those dependencies locked down and you're aware of it. Otherwise, you might have to move some of those applications off first before you move the host. The other thing is people sometimes use VMware on one of the major clouds. That's another way. So
yes,
rehosting can be one of 2 ways. You can either go to native VMs in Azure or EC2s in AWS, or you might have hosted VMware on one of those clouds. Actually, all the main clouds provide a hosted VMware option, and sometimes that could be even easier to migrate because you can almost, you know, copy paste your server from one place to the other. It's not quite copy and paste.
And what's VMware, Matt?
Oh, VMware is
for anyone that doesn't know.
VMware is the hypervisor that's probably in your data center today. So that's running all your virtual machines in your data center. So it's basically it has a hypervisor and it runs all your VMs. And you can not only run that in your data center, but you can run that in the cloud as well. So if you're running the same sort of hypervisor in both environments, you can transfer those images across pretty easily, although there's a bit of a cost involved from a VMware perspective because you've got to pay for much larger machines in cloud to be able to host that. If you're exiting a data center, it's kind of the tool of choice because you need to do it quickly and it's usually the fastest way to do it. Okay.
Just one other thing around like, obviously a lot of organizations have, you know, like a desire to move to cloud quickly or to like accelerate their transition to cloud. And lifting and shifting can be a great way to do that. I can't remember where I was going with this.
We better keep this here.
I've completely lost my train of thought. A lot of organizations have a desire or perhaps are triggered by a desire. The decision to move to cloud is triggered by a desire to enable them to innovate faster, right? Would you agree, Matt?
Yeah.
So, and in order to accelerate that journey, we need to like get on to cloud first, right?
Yep. And it allows you to, it allows you to...
I'm going to say what you're going to say.
It allows you to keep your systems as they are, but in the new environment, once you've moved your stuff over, then you can start tweaking your applications.
And then we're using that migration journey as like an opportunity for learning as well, right?
Yep, exactly. And getting your operations
even if it is, even if it is lifting and shifting, like obviously the goal is always to modernize and to move faster and innovate faster. But sometimes in order to get there, we have to get things migrated quickly, especially, you know, for organizations that are like just starting.
Yep, especially around, also if you've got legacy systems that you need to get off. You might have legacy hardware you need to get off. It's a good opportunity to
Yes.
practice migrations and getting your team some experience in the cloud while you're at it.
Yes, it's a and some of us are running a timeline, right? It's like, well, we need to exit on premise by a certain date, and this is the way to get there for the most part.
Yeah.
Whilst obviously it's not the most modern approach, it enables us down the line.
Yep, for sure. We can move to refactoring or replatforming.
Refactoring.
So refactoring or replatforming, however you want to call it, it's kind of the same outcome where you can make adjustments to your application to optimize it for cloud infrastructure. That might mean as simple as switching from a hosted database on your server to a managed database in the cloud. It's, the benefits there are huge because you don't have to do all the maintenance of your database because you're using AWS's or Azure's managed databases. So your database teams just have to deal with the application side of the database rather than the system side of the database, and it takes resources away from your servers, which you can use to running your actual application and business logic code. The other thing you can do around replatforming is using other managed services like managed message queues and things like that. So I guess it's a step somewhere between rehosting and rearchitecting, and gives you some benefits. Some extra cloud benefits, and all the other important thing is updating your operating system to a more current version as well.
Are you talking about server operating system, Matt?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
The server operating system could be running out of date in your data center, and you can build new in cloud and then reinstall the applications. You might still have the same application code, but you've got a more modern and patched operating system that's probably more...
Well, I think that's an important point as well, right? Is around security. Like where there is the opportunity to update operating systems, it's important to do that for security reasons, right?
Yep. And sometimes licensing reasons too. But yeah, it's mostly... There's a lot of organisations get stuck on the older, Windows Server 2012, for example.
Oh, totally. Yes. 1997.
No, not that old.
I've seen 1997 only a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
Yep. Only a couple of years ago, I've seen 1997 servers. So that's, so we want to, look at those as soon as we can as possible as well, just to avoid security issues. Yeah. But I think as well as that, Matt, and like this is probably something you're probably kind of familiar with, is like I think there are instances where we will go into like what we think is going to be a lift and shift, and it ends up being a replatforming.
Yep.
Because as we get through that discovery phase, we find things that are connected to our applications or supporting our applications that need to be updated or optimized in order to enable the transition.
Yeah, that can happen for sure. It can also happen the other way, where you planned to do a replatform for whatever reason, but it became too difficult. And you couldn't get a vendor to
Yes.
reinstall the software, so you have to switch back to doing a lift and shift for whatever reason. So sometimes your plans can get unstuck. I've had that
As
happen.
with all IT change management, sometimes the plans don't go to plan.
Exactly. A full re-architect can take a year or more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even
Significant piece of work.
Even replatforms can take sometimes 6 months for complex ones. 6 to 12 months sometimes. With there was one that I worked on that had 30 plus, probably 50 plus interfaces. And so there had to be designs done for all of those. So it was like one application with all these, different pieces that had to be all moved over. So, but re-architecting can never end as well. So that's why there's got to be a clear business.
No, absolutely.
Around re-architecting.
Yes. We always have to be thinking about what the future looks like and working to get there.
And the last thing I'd say about re-architecting is that you can potentially have a high cost in operations because teams have to be retrained with the other approaches. With re-architecting, it's a lot more complex. They need a lot more cloud skills and ability, and there might be a steeper learning curve for the team. So there's definitely business value in doing re-architecture, but that has to be weighed up
Totally.
with the other things, other bits and pieces that you've got to take care of.
Well, it's generally a significant piece of work, right? So we need to just make sure that the right level of planning and discovery is put into those sorts of projects, before and during and probably after as well.
Exactly. It'll never end. It'll never end, Georgia.
No, well, that's it. It's endless. And it should be. If we're not thinking about the next thing, then we must be, because we're going to be dead.
Exactly right.
That's the only reason. That's the only reason. Either as an organisation or as individuals. I don't know.
We'll briefly touch on the other R's. So there might be reasons not to migrate. So retire, for example. I don't mean I'm retiring.
For anyone from AWS or Azure or GCP, you can just turn off the podcast now.
But
everybody else stay with us.
They'll even tell you some things might not, need to be moved. There might be an application that you're not going to use.
Some things might not be able to be moved.
I know.
Yes, and there's no point migrating things that are going to be dead.
Exactly. An application could be redundant, or another application that you have might be taking functionality away from, the app that you've marked as going to retire. So it's the best migration to decommission it rather than actually move it. It's usually the easiest way to get your migration numbers up. It's still sometimes classed as a migration. So retire as many as you can. Retain.
Screen test.
There is screen test is valid. Turn it off. See if anyone screams. If no one screams, keep it off.
Yes. One that I have used many a times. Many a times. Well, especially with older organizations, right, is that they've got stuff that people created a long time ago and is perhaps not in use anymore. But when we run asset discovery, we can see it.
Yeah.
So if we can't see traffic going to and from it, well, then it's like, well, turn it off and see if anyone gets upset. And that's what we mean when we say scream test for anybody that's not familiar with that term.
You got to hear for the screams.
A good way to get numbers on the board, Matt.
Exactly. It's a numbers game, Georgia. Retain, that's another good one. Keeping it on premises. You might not be able to move it. It might be some huge on-premises only data store that cannot be moved to the cloud for whatever reason. Licensing even. Sometimes there's licensing reasons why things can't be moved. Or regulatory reasons. Although those reasons are becoming less and less.
Yes.
These days.
And why is that, Matt?
Because
I think there was some news about that today, actually, in EMEA.
Oh, there was, yes. So AWS announced the European Sovereign Cloud. So what that means is that AWS are going to run a completely European EU-run AWS in the EU by EU employees for EU people to meet European Union data sovereignty requirements. So completely isolated from the rest of AWS. So
I expect our Euro cloud to be like very refined.
refined. AWS version 2.
Be very refined. And come with croissants.
Croissants. Maybe it will. Well, the first one's in Germany, so it might come with sausages or something.
Ooh, pretzels. Are pretzels actually German? I don't know. I think they are.
I don't know. Our listeners will tell us if we're wrong. Send us feedback. Email address at the end of the show.
Like, what about the sausages?
Repurchase is the last R. Do you know what repurchase is? Or do you want me to tell you?
Of course. I know what it is. I don't know whether our audience knows what it is.
Well, you like shopping, so it's similar to that, isn't it?
I like shopping. Yeah, exactly. I think, sometimes as IT executives, it's time to go shopping, and that's what repurchasing is. Finding an off-the-shelf product to support the function that we're looking for.
Yeah. It could be a new off-the-shelf product, or it could be a SaaS product, or it could be some other third party who's providing you this software to do whatever you want it to do. And I can give you an example. An example is moving from self-hosted Confluence, for example, to the SaaS-hosted Confluence. So self-hosted Confluence, for those who don't know, is basically an online wiki documentation system used by many organisations, but it requires VMs and databases to operate. So as soon as you move to a hosted version of that, then you don't have to migrate those servers. You can turn them off. You have to do a data migration to the SaaS provider, but other than that, and SaaS is software as a service, for those who don't know. You still have to do a data migration, but you get the benefit of being able to turn off servers when you're done with the migration.
Yes, because it would generally anything we buy off the shelf is going to be cloud native or cloud.
Usually. Especially these days.
Yeah.
So, Georgia, why is it important to understand these strategies if you're running a business and your IT function? Why is it important to understand these 6 R's? around, for example, your
I
business
think,
goals?
I think, yeah, I think as like business executives, well, I mean, as obviously our IT executives are quite familiar with a lot of this content, but as business executives, I think, you know, understanding what the potential options are is really important when it comes to executing your migration strategies, because whatever strategies you decide to use are going to have an impact on your business, right? So it's important to have an understanding of what that could potentially look like and be working to, you know, mitigate those risks as much as possible.
Yeah.
And it might be something as simple as like, you know, perhaps we have to deal with like outages for X period of time in order to enable the migration if we're looking to like re-architect. But maybe the business benefit of doing that is going to be really well justified. So yeah, it's definitely about, you know, finding a strategy that is going to align with our business goals. Sometimes that means, you know, short-term loss for long-term gain. But using the strategies in the right way to secure those cost savings, enable us to innovate and take things to market really quickly.
Yeah. And the keeping an eye on the skills and each of the depending on your cloud objectives, how quickly you want your teams to be skilled up in the cloud. A lot of the time, you can align that with the particular, you know, migration strategy that you've chosen for. You know, if you're a small shop, it might be the same strategy for everything. But if you're a larger organisation, you might have different strategies for different apps, and you can align the people who require the specialist skills with the more complex ones, and then you can align your more operational focused teams with the easier ones. Either way, there'll be a skills uplift required, but it'll be different depending on which approach you take for the migration.
Cost management as we go into and like get through that migration strategy is really important as well.
Yep.
Because, for a few reasons, partly because, well, I think it's important to be mindful that as you transition to cloud, the way that those budgets need to look might change. Cost management. So yeah, so as we get through the cloud migration journey, obviously the way that cost affects us as like executives running different parts of the organization, it might potentially change. So I think that's important to be aware of as well. And then of course factoring in any like potential inconveniences or additional labor or what have you that we might need from an operational perspective in order to enable that transition, whether it be like, you know, we have to take on some more manual work whilst the changes take place or whatever it might be, right? Just a few points to think about.
Yep. And I'll add to the cost discussion around a lot of the time the re-architecture and re-platform can actually end up costing a lot less than if you're doing a rehost. Because if you're using a lot of managed services, that usually works out cheaper, especially from not just from a cloud resource usage perspective, but from a people resource perspective, because you don't have to do a lot of stuff. So your teams are free to add more business value by doing other better things, more valuable things for your organisation rather than mundane operational tasks.
Absolutely.
So that's another thing to keep in mind. So,
in terms of speed and agility, obviously sometimes there are situations where as an organization, we're under time pressure to get things done. Having said that, I do think that, you know, there's an argument to like making sure that we have a level of internal pressure, because if we allow, you know, an unlimited amount of time for cloud to happen, we're going to pay the price for it as organizations, I believe, in terms of being, fast innovators and market leaders and, customer responsive.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to get there quickly and learn quickly and iterate quickly is super important. And quickly can be different lengths of time for each organisation. Quickly for someone who's never been in cloud might be months, whereas quickly for someone else who are a little bit more progressive, I guess, might be weeks.
Yeah, totally. And then obviously, and I feel like we talk about this 24/7 is skills. One more thing on skills. I do think that as you develop that migration plan, especially for like core applications, part of the consideration that you make as you go through the different stages of that project is how you will continue to skill your people.
Oh, yeah. That's very important.
Like as a, yes, and being very like intentional about it. Obviously there's a plan for how we're going to execute the migration. Like there's a change management plan for that, right? I also think we should have a change management plan in place for our people and for skills, both operationally and as part of IT.
Yeah, because cloud moves quickly, much quicker than when you're on-prem. So you do have to keep up to date with all the latest the changes and what's going on, even though not everything affects you. You don't have to be up to date on absolutely everything, but there needs to be a plan for, being aware of new services that come online, which you might be able to take advantage of.
Absolutely.
Quickly on compliance and security.
Job zero, Matt. Job zero.
Make sure that...
Job zero before we leave.
Make sure you're working with your regulatory requirements around security. You get a lot better security in cloud. You build your solutions in cloud with least privilege access around network and roles. You'll end up being a lot more secure in cloud if you do it correctly. You can be insecure both in cloud and on-prem if you do it incorrectly, but the tools the cloud providers provide the tools to be able to be secure in cloud with a lot less effort, to be honest, as long as you are conscious about it and make conscious decisions to be secure around your data and your access. So, closing, cloud migration. So when you're doing a cloud migration, it's not purely IT decisions. They need to align your migration strategy needs to align with your business goals and your budgets and what you want to get from a cloud outcome. Are you just migrating and not doing anything else? Unlikely. The more you can replatform at least up front saves you time down the road. Rehost if you have to, but you get a lot more advantage from, replatform as an initial step if possible to keep your applications current. So, making sure your executives, both the IT and non-IT executives, are collaborating and making informed decisions around choosing the right strategy is very important, and making sure that the right risk tolerances around your approaches are balanced with your goals and making the right decision for your organisation. So understanding all these different ways of migrations is essential to be able to be an effective leader in IT in the current environment. So once you're in cloud, you can take advantage of all these other things like generative AI, which we discussed last episode, and whatever, there's always something new coming along that you can take advantage of once you've
Totally.
migrated. So if anyone wants to contact us, you can email feedback@cloud-dialogues.com, or on the website at cloud-dialogues.com, we have a form that you can anonymously send your suggestions and feedback. And also, if you like the podcast, please leave feedback on the Apple Podcast app. So,
Yes, give us a rating. Give us a rating.
even if you don't
some,
like it,
some
give us
comments.
a rating.
We would
A good
love that.
rating.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And then you can just send us an email with your angry comments.
That's right. And we'll do better next time. All right. Thanks, Georgia, for another week.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Matt.
No worries. See you.
Bye.
Bye.